Today, we are going to look at the subject of depression, and I think this is very fitting into this month of June, where we are becoming more aware of mental health. With regards to one of the videos under my podcasts where I speak on religious shame, I think very often the subject of depression actually also falls into one of these characteristics of religious shame. And I think it's so important for us to actually understand what is depression. So, when we are looking at it from a biblical perspective, we must know and understand that we have different components. When we are looking at the body, we know that the body is the temple and that we have a body, soul, and a spirit. And when we are addressing depression, we have to look at all of these different areas. So, when we are looking at depression, we have to understand that depression is often linked to a psychological condition. And we must know that this is more actually than a psychological response. It actually is a state of the nervous system. It is a state of shutdown. So, according to a doctor that I really love to watch because of her module that she has, she explains that depression often starts with a feeling of feeling startled, then stress and fight comes in, then the wall of feeling overwhelmed, then the freeze, and then the shutdown. So all of these different stages, we must understand that this is a nervous system state. So depression is more closely associated with a shutdown state, where the nervous system actually reduces energy because it no longer believes that an effective effort will actually restore its safety. So the nervous system then will stimulate the body to preserve energy. So the characteristics of this specific nervous system state, which is the shutdown state, is a state of low energy and fatigue, a lack of motivation, feeling emotionally numb, difficulty experiencing joy, social withdrawal, brain fog, feeling disconnected from oneself and others, and also reducing hope and drive. So it's really a state of the nervous system, and we have to understand that this feeling of feeling depressed, yes, it has a spiritual aspect that is connected to that, but that we must have more compassion for ourselves because we must understand that this is a state of our nervous system. It's a state where we have been exposed to stress and trauma for far too long, that the body doesn't perceive that it is safe anymore, and it wants to reserve energy, and therefore it goes into that shutdown state, which is the depression state. So from the surface, somebody like this can really look like a person, there's nothing wrong with them, they are happy, that we don't always see the signs, but when they are alone by themselves, they do experience all of these symptoms that I have just described. So the 4 stages or the 4 different patterns of stored trauma in the body is really dysregulation, energy depletion, a disconnection and an escape, and immobilization, and then also feeling stuck. So it can be feelings of I can't move forward, I have no energy left, I don't feel like myself. So this is a state of the nervous system, but here our thought patterns really plays a huge role. But if we can come to a place where we know that this isn't something that we've done wrong, but that it is a state of our nervous system, we know that we actually have the ability to then change this. I want to just give you an example of how this can actually be in a normal person's life from one example, and you can maybe link this to a state of your nervous system or your past experiences and know where these 4 different stages manifested in your life. So, for example, when a child is experiencing ongoing stress, fear, neglect, rejection, criticism, abuse, instability, or emotional disconnection, their nervous system learns that survival patterns can continue as well, and it goes into their adulthood. So first of all, when we look at the definition of being startled, we know that the nervous system actually detects a threat. So that can be when a child, for example, is shouted at, abused, rejected, neglected, experiences fear. So the first response is a startled response where the nervous system detects the fear. The body's response would be an increase in their heart rate, muscular tension, heightened alertness, and an increase in adrenaline. So when a child experiences this, the child immediately becomes alert. For example, their muscles will tighten. They know that something bad is going to happen. And this is a normal response. Then we go into the second response, which is the stress response, the fight and flight response. So this is where the body actually gets ready to protect itself. Do I need to fight or do I need to escape? Those are the 2 things. And how this then impacts a child is the child maybe learns for survival to protect itself. They must stay very quiet. They must hide in their room. They must please everyone. They must become a good child to avoid conflict. And this is then the child actually trying to survive in an environment where they do not feel safe. But this can then have different manifestations in adults. This can be perfectionism then, going into anxiety, into people pleasing, hypervigilance, and also difficulty in relaxation. But now we go over into the third structure, and that is feeling overwhelmed. So when you feel overwhelmed, how this then corresponds with a child in this situation is a specific child then reaches a point where stress will exceed their capacity to actually cope. Their nervous system begins to realize, I cannot really stop this. I cannot really escape from this, and I cannot really change this. So this can be when a child experiences constant emotional neglect, bullying, rejection, unpredictable caregivers or parents. And this means that the child will then, they will be created a state of feeling helpless. But when you are an adult and this perceives into adulthood and it's not sorted out, it becomes burnout. It becomes emotional exhaustion. It becomes chronic stress and feeling trapped and difficulty making decisions. And then going into the further state, remember we are talking about depression now. Then going into the next stage would be the freeze response. And the freeze response will be the body will then shift from mobilization into immobilization. So instead of fighting or fleeing, the nervous system says, stay still, do not attract attention to yourself, do not actually feel because that's unsafe. So when a child repeatedly are shamed by not being able to express their emotions, not being able to ask for help, speak up for themselves, or show their own needs. This means that they know that to disconnect actually from their feelings or something that is safe, because it's too painful to actually go to that place, or it's too painful to actually show your needs because you are anyway just going to be rejected and things like that. So in adults, it will then manifest as feeling stuck, procrastination, disassociation, emotionally numbness towards yourself, towards your partner, towards your children, difficulty setting boundaries, difficulty expressing your emotions. And then looking at the last stage, this is the stage of depression where it is the shutdown response. So the shutdown response is then the nervous system enters a conservation state where the body actually decides, do I have enough energy to keep on fighting? And remember, this isn't just a conscious decision. It's something that is linked to everything that I've now explained. So everything begins to slow down. So in a child, we know that a child who has experienced years of rejection, neglect, or chronic fear stops hoping that things will ever change. And their nervous system then protects themselves by reducing energy and emotional engagement. But if this goes on and it's not corrected, this is where depression will manifest in adults. The feeling of hopelessness, low dopamine drive, feeling disconnected from your own purpose, social withdrawal, less and a loss of motivation. This is where the nervous system has then learned that mobilizing energy feels unsafe or actually pointless. So this is not laziness. It is a form of trauma. And when we look at this, we know that with this month of mental awareness, we really have to be aware of this. And we have to be there for one another, because if we are not, we will then really miss the whole point. We know that God has designed our nervous system to function in a specific way, and how how our nervous system is actually supposed to function is in a way that is safe. It learns to function correctly in an environment where we do feel safe. So this brings me back to the fact that there are certain parts within us that's still stuck in time, that's still stuck in that memory, in that trauma, in that specific area. And a part of us who have never maybe felt love, or a part of us that never really truly understands God and who God is. A part of us who has so many questions that hasn't been answered or dealt with. And a lot of times in those situations, this is where these different stages of depression came in, and we just get to a point where we just feel, oh, but what do I really need to do? But we have to, as fellow believers and counselors, we have to help people to go over into a place where they can actually feel safe with themselves, with others, with their relationship with God, and allow them to express their feelings. We must help them to identify the trauma cycles in their life. We have to be able to see these different signs of startle and stress and overwhelm and freeze and shutdown. We have to help them to see that, because that takes away guilt and shame and condemnation, which a lot of times come in with religious shame. We have to look for places where they were bullied, where they experienced rejection, where they had unpredictable caregivers, people that were not really there for them. And we have to help them to find meaning in that and bring truth to that specific area. We have to help them realize they are not weak, they are not lazy. This doesn't mean that you are enabling them and equipping them in their state of depression. Enabling is something so different. So we are not enabling somebody that's struggling with depression and just wants to sit in that hole. We are not enabling them. We are actually giving them tools and guiding them with the right equipment, with the right tools, with the right words, so that they will be able to move over into a state where they feel safe again. We have to help them identify the different thought patterns that they have. And we have to help them to develop new pathways in their brain. And we call this neuroplasticity. So when we are looking at neuroplasticity, it is actually the brain's ability to change, adapt, reorganize, and create new natural pathways throughout your life. So the brain then learns new ways of coping and dealing with trauma. So the nervous system can learn safety, it can learn connection, trust, hope, healthy boundaries, and emotional regulation. And this is why healing is actually possible even decades after the specific trauma that has happened to you. And remember that this trauma isn't just childhood trauma, it can be any type of trauma. And remember, we don't just get big T traumas, we also get small T traumas. So many trauma survivors actually disconnect from their emotions, but we have to help them to connect in a safe environment to their emotions, to help them to regulate their emotions and move through that. We can do this by teaching them how to do deep breathing, grounding, going for slow walks, stretching, and really being connected to their body and how they are experiencing their trauma in their body, helping them to understand that we have to connect again with our body, because in our day and age we really live in our minds, in our heads so much that we don't really live with being present in the moment, being present in the times and seasons that God has given to us. We live in our minds, and that leads us to live in a place of disconnection. We don't want to live in a place of disconnection. We want to bring safety so that connection can yet again be established. We know that there are so many preconceived ideas about who God really is. And this is where it is so important to talk to God and show, so that He can show you who He was and still is in that trauma, where He was, and what does He now want to teach you, what does He want to show you. There are a lot of misconceived ideas about depression, and I hope that just one of these videos will help you to realize that you do not have to live in guilt and shame and condemnation because you feel depression. You do not have to live in that state. You can be more than an overcomer overcoming this, because you have people in your life that can help you. Reach out. Reach out, even if it is with the last little bit of your energy. Reach out to people that can help you and guide you on the road to recovery. And know that your past does not define who you are now. Your past does not define your future and where you are heading towards. That you have a hope. Even if you just are sitting where you are currently and you are looking around you and you are just looking for one thing to be grateful for, or just one thing that will help you and uplift you, you will be able to find that. You do not have to live in this dungeon, in this place of depression. You can be more than an overcomer through Yeshua that is there to guide you, and through other fellow believers who will definitely be there to guide you. I know that, religion actually has so much that is linked to that is a false representation of who God is. God is not condemning in any way. He is a God that stays the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We see His love and caring and kindness in the way that He looks after His creation. We see that in the way that He spends time with us, and how He has so much patience with us to help and guide us along the way. He does not want us to condemn ourselves any longer. He really wants us to be saved from this place and delivered out of this. And remember, when we are looking at depression, we are not just looking at the spiritual side. We are also looking at the soul side. But this, we are also looking at the body side and what the nervous system's role is. And that also helps us lessen the burden of condemnation on ourselves.